Hey, well, good morning. My name is Jill Moreno Ikari, and I will be your co-host. And we also have the lovely Caitlin Choi. You probably can see her there. And we also have Jen Derilo up on the top slide there, and also Professor Pegah Motaleb. And so all of us are going to be co-hosting today our workshop on Sentipensante Pedagogy and its relation to service learning and the civic engagement work that we're doing in our classes. So we've got some slides and we're going to be getting those up shortly so you can follow along with our workshop. And thanks again for putting in your one word, one sentence description of how you're feeling right now. You can also unmute yourself if you wanted to just say it instead of putting it in the chat box. So feel free to unmute yourself if you want to let us know how you're feeling.
It's nice to have the brisk weather and the soothing music as a nice way to start the morning. I don't know, it's kind of chilly where I'm at. I can feel the air coming in. Refreshing.
Refreshing. Nice. Yeah, it's cloudy here too where I'm at. So nice change of pace with the weather. It feels like it's okay to be inside in front of the computer in a weird way. Yeah. Thanks, Craig. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to slide 3. So here is our workshop today is actually motivated by the Speak Out workshop series that we went to over the summer during summer break. And it was a 3-4 day long institute, the Speak Out Summer Institute. And there were many speakers. And one of the speakers was Laura Rendon, who's here. You can see the author of Sentipensante Pedagogy, which is the sensing and thinking, educating for wholeness, social justice, and liberation. And so we were really inspired by her work and especially how it intersected with some of the work we're already doing on campus. So she comes up with this model of the individual, and we'll look at this in more context later as we move through the workshop. But it looks at the individual, so one person, one student, one faculty colleague, one person, and then looking at the community surrounding them, so they're really part of something larger, and how that would motivate social justice. So we thought it was really timely with what's going on in our world today and what's going in our world all the time, actually. So we look forward to kind of moving through this. In one sentence, she says that this pedagogy, so this is in Rendon's words, that Sentipensante Pedagogy is representing the union and coexistence of two seemingly opposite concepts, the sentir of intuition, so in Spanish that means to sense or to feel, introspection and the inner life, and the pensar of intellectual development, and pensar meaning to think in Spanish. So basically these two ideas basically fusing to make one. All right, hit it.
Okay, sorry, you guys. I had to quickly like unmute myself. So yeah, I guess I can talk a little bit about my journey and how I started to slowly adopt service learning and integrate it into my curriculum. I was really lost on, not lost, but I was just always like for many years, like really on, like just not solid with my curriculum for English 205. And then around that time, Caitlin came along to Mesa, and she's the one who taught me about service learning and just gave me some great literature to read, and told me that my colleague Jill in my same department is also doing it. So I started to think like, okay, this could be good for my English 205 class. And I started to, after like reading some of the literature that Caitlin had given me, I started to think of like what I want to do, and kind of like in the long term with my assignments. Like, do I just want students to just read books and write essays just for English 205, and then many years later, like, they forget about that class? Or do I want to kind of create the kind of curriculum and the assignments that will have more of a long lasting effect on them? And it just really coincided so well with the pedagogy of service learning. And so my first semester, I just had my students read a few articles about service learning. And then I had this just like requirement for them to just do 10 hours of community service. And then they would just take their experiences doing these community service hours, and like the people that they met at the organizations, the activities that they did, and they would just have to like write about them in their essays. And so for like my first year, that was it. And then I started to ask students to do an assignment where they would capture their experiences by taking pictures, and then they had to post it to their Instagram and their social media and share it with their family, friends, and followers. And then they had to write like a 50-word blurb about what they were doing. So what you see on the screen are examples of things that my students have done. And the community service locations could be on campus. So on the left-hand side, you see my student Mary. She did her community service at the organic garden at Mesa College that Waverly Ray does. And then my other student on the right, he actually like took it, another level and went and started to make homes, in Tijuana. And so the students would then just come to the class, and they would just share their experiences about how positive they would feel. And their experiences were really reflected in the books that I had them read. Later on in slide number 11, we'll show you guys some examples of books that we assigned our students to read. And so just their connections on the field, doing community service work with the people that they met, and the positive feeling that they were left with, and seeing that in the books just kind of started to really make me more comfortable with doing service learning. So in this sense, as I started to see my students bring their pictures to class and do their Instagram post assignment, I started to see that my students were becoming like mini activists and social change agents. And I really thought that it was just going to last for that one semester. And just a few weeks ago, a student of mine emailed me and she said, I'm going to do an internship, with Brian Stevenson's organization. And so it just made me believe that it wasn't just this one semester. It's actually, having them, do this service learning kind of practice even after the class. Brian Stevenson is the author of the book Just Mercy that my student service learning students read. And so in her email to me, she wrote about how she was so inspired by that book and wants to continue this practice of service learning. So I have just been doing it for about 3 semesters now. I started to kind of like really get students to see the humanitarian role that they can play as students in English 205. And so, they really see themselves as, like healers and liberators of the community, even if it's just in their small, small ways. So like I said, it's my 3rd semester doing it because of COVID. This semester, I just had students just read the literature. I didn't require them to do 10 hours of community service. But Caitlin gave me some great organizations to which I can refer my students to do community service for in home, remotely from home. So next semester, I plan on re-implementing the community service hour portion of it. And, I couldn't have done this without, the ideas that Jill and Caitlin bounced off to me. In the very beginning, I remember my students kind of like not being too happy about the idea of doing 10 hours of community service on top of all their other obligations. But Caitlin came and did a presentation to my class and she spoke to my students. And I remember something she said to them. She said, your teacher could have you writing an extra assignment. Your teacher could have you reading an extra book, but instead she's giving you this opportunity to do something meaningful. And ever since my students heard her say that, I saw their attitudes shift. And so it just became a really good, meaningful curriculum that I developed for my regular English 205. And without even knowing that diagram, I was doing it. And then after hearing, Laura Rendon speak, I was like, wow, service learning is really the way to go. So that's kind of my experience with service learning.
Great, thanks, Pegah. The part about the Brian Stevenson internship, I was trying to look for my reaction button here, but that's so awesome. Like that's the goal, right? It's just to have like create the classroom as this space that the students can feel brave in, but then not just confined. I hate that. Sorry, I said that word, but not just relegated to that space, but once they go outside. And I feel like that's what most of us hope for with our students. So that is amazing. And it always surprises me when I have impacted a student. And so I love that story. Thank you for sharing. So my story for getting into service learning is because I wanted to do something like Jill and Pegah. This is actually my very first semester trying it out. First of all, I just cannot recommend Caitlin enough because like I think I have tried to conceive of this assignment myself on my own, which didn't really go that well. So I think finally being able to say, I probably need some help and maybe an expert to help me on this. It was really nice to have Caitlin be that person. And then I got to see amazing models like Jill and Pegah. And then I just felt like, oh man, I want to do that. So for me, it's kind of a little bit, it's been a little bit bumpy this semester, but the reason why I wanted to do service learning actually is because of not Laura Rendon's text, although I did go to her speak out workshop too. And as soon as as soon as she was talking about it, I wanted to do it right away. As you know, I usually tend to do that. I want to jump on the new thing, which is probably not always great. The gradual makes more sense, but for some reason, I just like to attack things. But before Speak Out or during Speak Out, I was actually finishing up Dr. Bettina Love's book, We Want to Do More Than Survive. And she, her whole framework is about abolitionist teaching and getting and upping or leveling up students' civic engagement, not just like outside of the classroom, but in the classroom. And she really challenged my thinking, because I started feeling as if my trying to push the students to be a little bit more engaged with their world, just kind of like I would cross my fingers that it would follow them outside the classroom, but then I knew I had to do a little bit more. So I took a little bit more of a complicated approach, or a complicated inspired path. So there was service learning with Jill and Pegah. There was the Dr. Bettina's abolitionist teaching. And then already I've been trying to figure out the smoothest way to implement Dr. Asau's contract grading. So what I did was I just kind of combined all the three. So in my class, so for those of you, some of you are here who do know like Jason and Ramali. But with contract grading, it's not, the students aren't accumulating points or traditional grades. So you have a set number of assignments that students have to complete to get just the default grade of a B. So the B becomes a little bit more achievable for students, especially those who have been pretty much beaten down thinking like they're not good writers. And so I feel like the grading contract shifts that idea a bit, and it's pretty abolitionist in a sense. So for my grading contract, to get an A in the class, I used to require students to be leaders in the classroom. So that basically meant they had to lead discussions. They had to be on like the liaisons between me and the classroom. So kind of like honors students, like they would have to like really engage in the class as leaders in order to get the A. And then they would keep a log of that. A lot of students seem a little bit put off by this idea of being like the leaders in the classroom. So what I ended up doing was I switched it and created the civic engagement project. So that way I was kind of tying in what I've been learning from Dr. Bettina to get the students to be more civically minded and up their skills in that way, so that it infused what they were doing for my classroom. And then I was able to do the thing that, Rendon was talking about, is just getting the students to be like, seeing them as whole individuals. They're not just students, but they occupy all these different roles that actually fuse the way, or directly impact the way they will move through the classroom, move outside of the classroom, in their communities, in their homes. So you're like tapping into their cultural wealth already. And so I felt that, so instead of calling it service learning, I just switched it up and did civic engagement as a nod to Dr. Bettina Love. And so that got students a little like really excited, because of course there's a lot of overachievers who are thinking, well, I want to get a B, but how do I get the A? And so it was really nice to kind of have this option for them where it wasn't just going to be for the A or for the classroom, but it was going to be for themselves. So I continually just, Caitlin and I would just, tell the students, well, what are you passionate about? Or what kind of career do you want to have? What do you already know how to do? And then how can you kind of get those, take those skills and that passion and connect to someone outside of this classroom or an organization, or what kind of project could you do? And then I think with everything going on with COVID, that to me really signaled that there needed to be a way for me to get my students to feel like whole individuals again, and then not just with themselves, but having to connect with somebody else. So the lens that I teach my comp classes, I use, this idea of being an abolitionist teacher, but then I also use a Filipino concept called kapwa. And so I tell them basically kapwa just means, whoever I'm connected to. So it's a shared self, right? So this is what they know automatically once they get into the classroom. Like this is important. Like what you're doing in the classroom and what someone else is doing in the classroom, you guys, it's kind of a shared thing. It's communal. So I thought that all of those things kind of worked really well together, just having this sense of critical empathy for other folks, for themselves, for each other, and then, yeah, I mean, tie it to a grade. Unfortunately, a lot of students are just so, that's what they've been conditioned to think. And that's not bad. Why not tie it to something that's going to be, something that's going to be meaningful? So that's how I kind of stumbled into doing the service learning. And then poor Caitlin had to change like all the handouts from, service learning to civic engagement, because I just wanted to reiterate, this is what we're doing. We're trying to become, citizens of the world and of our community, and create a space outside of this maddening remote world where we're not connected, and just somehow connect. One of the coolest projects that I've seen that my students are doing is not necessarily just the project itself. So there are 3 young women who are making cards for an old folks home. But the thing that was so sweet about that is this was early in the semester, and I guess somehow they already bonded. And so they asked if they could do it together, so that because they bonded and they wanted to have this activity that they did together every week over Zoom, just like making art for people who feel disconnected from the rest of the world and their families. So I thought that was really, really sweet, because it is hard for the students to build connections online if they hadn't seen each other or hadn't met at all in person. So I feel like this project, really, really helped them see each other as co-conspirators, right? And I don't know, sources of comfort. So that's my take on it.
Okay, well, thank you, Jen, and thank you, Pegah, for sharing your stories related to service learning and civic engagement, and relating it back to Rendon's faculty positionality. So as you can see in the middle of this slide here, there's that diagram, and this is taken from the book. And in the middle, we can see this teacher learner as basically, this one space, one area that really taps into these other areas of the artist, the activist and the social change agent, and the humanitarian, as well as this healer liberator. So we can see that through both Pegah's and Jen's class, they're doing all of this. And again, they might not have known about this diagram that it even exists, but they were doing this work already. And that's why we had them share their stories first, because then we can see how these stories kind of fit together. But again, the students in Pegah's class, being able to use social media and kind of get the word out and show the wonderful things that they're doing out in the community. And then with Jen's class, the students really taking on more of this civic engagement role and being citizens of the world, responsible citizens and citizens that care about each other. So it's really inspiring work. So thank you to Pegah and Jen and Caitlin for facilitating all of that as well. All right, so we want to go to the next slide, and we can see here shortly. There we go. So this is another figure in the book. It's labeled Stances Reflecting the Relationship Between Individual and Community. And we'd like you to just kind of start thinking about this question of how will incorporating social justice in your curriculum help you to connect with your students? And as you're thinking about this question, we can refer to this figure. So the figure starts off at the top, it says dualistic stance. And so basically there's this idea that there's these separate entities. We have the individual and we have the community, and they're very separate. You can see how the circles are not overlapping. And that in a classroom, in past or in traditional classrooms, the individual is what's focused on. What can the individual do on a test? What can the individual write in an essay? What can the individual provide in terms of showing their learning? And the community is something separate from the individual. Then we have the integrative stance, where we have now kind of this overlap that the individual and the community, although they seem like they may be separate, there is some overlap here. And the third is this integrative illuminative stance. And now we have these three parts. We have both the individual and the community and the social justice aspect. And just to kind of back it up a little bit, in her book, she talks about the disfracismo, which is basically, I'll use the quote from her book. Disfracismo is a stylistic concept in the Aztec culture, where a pair of words is employed to refer to a third term or phrase. And the third term reveals the hidden wisdom behind the paired dualities. In modern times, we might consider a disfracismo as a dialectal space where two interactive themes exist in tension with one another. So kind of borrowing from the Aztec culture, we can see that we could use this model, right, to kind of understand that social justice is this hidden wisdom, as she refers to it in her book. And the hidden wisdom comes about through, again, these two seemingly different aspects, which is the individual and the community. So basically, she's describing this new dream field. That's a quote from her book, this new dream field. And part of that new dream field is this collaboration, right, between students and teacher, students in the community, teacher in the community. This transdisciplinarity. So again, multiple disciplines collaborating together. So perhaps English and math and English and history, history and math and biology and math and biology and English, and all of these different collaborations. And again, transdisciplinarity. And then we have this idea of intuition, people trusting their instincts, people trusting their feelings and bringing it together with rational and knowledge and all of these things that we currently value in the classroom. And then there's this idea of active learning. So not only are they applying the things that they learn in the classroom, but outside the classroom, be it service learning or civic engagement. But this new dream field is really opening up a lot of possibilities that perhaps we thought weren't either important, valued, or meaningful. And we can see that, again, another phrase that she uses is this multi-human pedagogy. And that kind of, brings us back to service learning or the civic engagement, where it's really kind of not just the individual, but again, bringing in other individuals, bringing in the community. All right, so we're going to advance to this next slide. And I believe it's right. So what you see here is actually the Service Learning Community Student Reflection Volume 1, meaning there'll be more volumes to come, and hopefully with your students' work in here. So basically, in my English 101, a few semesters back, we had students participate in the community in different areas. You can see here that one student, Naisha Harper, she worked in the Joan Kroc Center And my other student here, hi Sun, worked in the Feeding San Diego. And these are just two essays, but this student reflection booklet has many essays from our students, basically just telling the story of their service learning, and how that was, important and how it was meaningful to them. And again, we're going to have more volumes, so we hope to collect additional stories. But we thought this might be a good visual to kind of highlight this idea that Rondon also makes, and that at this point that she makes about that learning takes time and continues beyond the academic term. This is one of those things that's part of this new dream field. And, that this real deep learning, happens over time, and we may not see it. The students may not even see it really until they're out of your classroom, and maybe they're out of school, and maybe they're like 2 jobs later, or maybe they have a family or wherever they're at, and they might apply that learning that they learned in your class, and they might not even remember that they learned it in your class, but that's not the point, right? The point is that they learned something in your class, and that they're able to use it later. So, it's really important to see that students are reflecting. That's one of the important things that we have our students do in service learning, and that they reflect on the work that they've done. So, that it continues, that we can see that this is a continuous learning journey beyond your classroom. All right, let's advance here. And now it's your turn. So we've been talking a lot so far. And so we'd want you to just kind of think about our new dream field. And at this point, if you can share what kind of experiences you would like to have your students experience in your class, you can either just unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat. Yeah, so we'll take some time to hear from you. So again, what do you have to say? We're ready.
Okay, I'm Christine. I don't know a lot of you, but it's really nice to be here, and thanks for the invite. I work over in Allied Health with the PT assistant students. So kind of like Pegah, and I think these guys were talking about that they kind of do this in their classes already. So this is really exciting to see some structure and some ideas that you guys to kind of elevate it and enhance that engagement as part of our profession. And I think just as being in the world of healthcare, social responsibility is integral and has always been a part of the program. And we've always required these certain amount of service hours that they have. But I would have to say one of the wonderful things about the pandemic was trying to figure out how we could continue this, and how it's even more important right now with just them feeling so disconnected, because they are people kind of students, and they really miss seeing each other. So I was just really impressed, talked a lot with a few of our students who tend to be more of our leaders. Also people who have, just different backgrounds. So we kind of had a little outline that we worked with our program director, and they took it upon themselves to be the coordinators for the volunteer work, the civic engagement. So we've done several of the similar things that you guys are doing. They are, have done the kind of some letter writing, and went to a couple, were allowed and given permission to go to the senior center and provide the puzzles. And some of them, we had them connect with some kindergarten students and paint rocks and give them these little kind of cool rocks. And they've also created videos for a lot of our other programs, which I think is really cool. But I think what I was looking for with you guys is we usually collaborate with our OTAs at Grossmont College. And so we don't really have the time. And I thought a service project would be really wonderful if the two groups could get together and do something for our nursing homes. Because of COVID, there's so many things that they need out there. So I was kind of just trying to think how to not chomp off too much and make it a valuable thing. So I'm kind of excited to maybe pick Caitlin's brain later Because you guys, it sounds like she really kind of helps, and Jill maybe give me some direction so I'm not all over the place. So anyways, thank you for letting me share.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Christine. Yes, I would say definitely, contact Caitlin. She is a great resource, like we've all been saying, for sure.
Thank you,
That would be the
Christine.
first step.
Definitely love to connect with you and see how we can make sure that those people in the nursing home aren't forgotten and that they also get some love from our community too.
I love it. Thank you, Caitlin. I'll be chatting with you.
So I definitely, so I've been coming in and out of these service learning workshops for a while and still haven't jumped in. But I didn't even consider it as a possibility during our online spaces while we're here. So I think I'm primed and ready to throw my 205 in the spring in, because intentionally I've kind of shifted the curriculum to really center around the idea of community and how we're all connected and disconnected and all these kinds of things. So I definitely am interested in the idea of framing it around that civic engagement kind of language. But yeah, I think, Caitlin, I would have to connect with you to kind of understand how to do this in some concrete ways online. Yeah.
Grandma, can I comment on what you were just saying?
Please.
Yeah, so the other thing that really got me encouraged about doing service learning online was having attended all of these social justice minded conferences over the summer, doing Speak Out Institute and doing NCORE. And then also just kind of attending some of the teach-ins that Haymarket Books had. So one of the things that made me got really excited, I was like, oh my God, my students should just they could attend these webinars and teach-ins, because my low-key goal is also to get them a little bit more politicized. I know that's kind of risky, but I really want my students to be more energized about their voices and doing something, because they're the ones who are going to make things happen. So something that ended up, and sometimes, you toss it out there and maybe 2 students will bite. One of my students in my Kakwa learning community did end up attending the youth summit that Speak Out had in October. And Caitlin and I were brainstorming with him so that he could come up with his own teach-in for our class, or even just for the campus. And it was really exciting to not just land on that idea, but we had other ideas because of that. And then, so it was a really, this is the perfect time for something like that, because all of these teach-ins are online now. And then the other thing is that students get to see how experts use Zoom, right? So a lot of the things that I've noticed is that why aren't my students really using chat the way I experienced using the chat box over the summer? Why do they feel so uncomfortable? I mean, it makes sense why they're uncomfortable, but I think for me, as long as I was exposed to that, then it became easier. And so that was, so thinking about all these different ways, service learning can kind of hit on all these different skills, was also something that was really nice about these remote learning experiences that Caitlin also provides. But I think for me, that was the way to go, was the teach-ins, getting that social justice lens, and yeah, the students being able to do it online.
I think that is, I really am thinking about it in that kind of way too. I'd love it to give them access to these workshops and things that really got me going and inspired and gave me a lot of ideas, because I'm trying to explore the idea of helping students kind of develop their radical imaginations, right? Like the world as it exists doesn't work, full stop, period. And so we're starting imagining, but like they have to continue. And so also that artistic component, which I know that you all did with the Cajitas project and the Baliakban boxes, like that whole thing, was that also part of the service learning civil engagement, or was that kind of a different thing? Because I think in my imagination, what my class would look like is a combination of that kind of thing. Second question is simply, so for like Speak Out, for example, that cost money. So how did you put that on the students as an expectation early on, like that some of these opportunities cost money, but then there's an access issue? So if you can talk about that, and then I'm done. And then Caitlin, I'll just reach out to you separately, just plan for the spring.
So for the cost with, like Speak Out, I was able to talk to them and work out like a group discount should, my students need it. And they were actually really willing to work within a budget, but because I only had the one student, I just ended up paying for him. So, I mean, I know it's not totally ethical, but it was like a long day. But my other go-to was, we have a lot of innovation grant funds from a project that we meant to do on campus last year. And so I just talked to Krista about that, and they're pretty flexible about like kind of, revising the original intent of the funds, especially if it's still pretty connected to the application. But you could also apply for the AS funds, the associated students had that, and then Humanities Institute, like, equity too. That was the way I would have gone. We also have a club, like if I'm thinking about the Asian students, they have their Asian Pacific Diversity Club. So I know they get some funding that they could probably use for events like that. And with the Balikbayan and Cajitas project, it was not necessarily part of the civic engagement requirement, but it was part of the grading contract. And so what I've been just trying to do is infuse more of these themes that I want to, like art. Like I wanted to make things so that they can kind of connect, like composition in itself, like writing is making with your hands, but they don't, it's a little bit more obvious if you're making art that this is something you're doing with your hands and it's tactile. But I wanted to kind of, show them that composition is also kind of art making. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I am all for more making in class.
I guess I can chime in. Oh, Jason had his hand up. Sorry, Jason.
That's okay. I don't know if this is relevant to the talk, but I've tried to merge art and design thinking with composition as well, to varying successes, I would say, with the students. This semester I had them make zines, living in the time of COVID, and showcasing student services, which was a really cool project, and they got way into it. But the quality of the, I guess, creative thinking, and I don't know if you could even qualitatively judge it, but just the effort that they seem to put into it varied dramatically. So some students got way into it, and the art, it was just amazing stuff, and other students just hit the mark, or maybe just short of it, in terms of expressing themselves and getting authentically involved. So I'm wondering, you guys have come up with strategies in terms of that process, that creative process, for maybe encouraging students less engaged to more fully engage?
I think about the Cajita Altas and Balibayan boxes as a project. It had multiple activities associated with it. And so Alexandra Moctezuma's, her students been engaging with art making as a concept, since it's a Chicano arts class, whereas I think Jen's Kapwa English 101 class isn't as much thinking within that frame. And so before the students started working on that project, we had a guest speaker event in which two local, well, one isn't local, but that's why we're able to get him, because we can Zoom him in as opposed to having to pay for hotel and everything. So we're able to get two artists whose careers were around making art, photography specifically, that captures and portray aspects of culture and self and manifesting those different elements within the work. And so kind of this theme of home, which connects really closely with Keta artists and Buying Boxes. One of the artists specifically has an art project around Buying Boxes. And so she's got videos. And so these photographers then serve as role models and helping to help the students to see how this project can connect with something that they are familiar with already. This home, this family, this sense of belonging that they have, that they usually separate from their, in their personal spaces, that they separate from their public space, their persona, their identity that they're willing to share with others. And so having the speakers speak about that and how they built an entire career around it, help to free up the minds of the students in a way where they're able to conceptualize the project and dig deeper into who they are. So one of the speakers, Filipina, and was able to talk about how, as coming from a population in which she doesn't see her culture in America, how she felt it was important to be able to highlight that. And the other person was a white male, in which he travels to a lot of different minoritized communities across the world in order to amplify their issues and to help promote their heritage and the different issues that they're facing. And so it helped also for the students who are not from a minoritized community to grapple with how do you sensitively deal with cultural issues that you may not feel comfortable with, but at the same time, you still need to engage in them and figure out positionality where you are with that. And so he served as a role model to help students be a little bit more comfortable with that. And I know, Jen, I don't know if you want to share in terms of how it landed with your student and that event, helping your students to be able to be served in doing better with that project.
Yeah, no, definitely, Jason, and I think Kara is talking about it too. But yeah, getting the students to engage is particularly challenging. And I think you'll always have one or two students who are just kind of phoning it in. But I think the multi-prong approach helped really well. Not just this idea of like having smaller assignments. I honestly didn't have smaller assignments to do that artifact project. I think what was really impactful was having the artists come in, and then having the artists come in to have a conversation about art making, but tying it to identity, tying it to community, tying it to social justice. And then seeing that when students could see the artists talk about it, I think then they start to think like, oh, well, they're also quite articulate about things that they're making with their hands. They're actually speaking in this way that, that feels like writing. I think that's what was so nice about that conversation, because we did have one student who was, kind of complained about how did this connect to English class, and but I think most of the students saw the connection. So for me, it helped to really start with this theme, like have this really strong theme of home in this sense. And it was something pretty, it's innocuous, but it's something that students know, right? And are feeling, or they feel disconnected from home. And then you bring in these artists who are really intentional about bringing that into their work. And then artists who are showing the mashup between or among cultures. So the thing that was really rad about Rizal is that she saw connections between TJ and Manila, and she was able to show that to the students. So once the students started moving into their own projects, you know, I tried to encourage them to like, can you mash up these two ideas? Like, could you maybe take the box and the altar? Can you create a box maybe for someone that you wished were still around to give these, you know, objects to? And there were quite a number of different interpretations on the artifacts, and it was really nice to see that. But I do think the most important thing is, if you want students to be engaged, it's nice to bring in community members who are doing that kind of work, and not necessarily, you know, we're probably doing that same work, but it's, you know, oh, it's the teachers, so they're going to talk to me about what they do. It's my teacher and blah, blah, blah. But actually engaging with folks in the community and having the students see that, I think that's what really helped with the engagement this time around. And then collaborating with Alessandra's class was really helpful, because then she was working on a different deadline. And so of course, you know, the students see their projects and then they feel like, oh man, I have to up my game now too, right? Or I have to do this project. But yeah, and I just always give them options. Like on my handout, there were traditional altars, and then there's the traditional balikbayan box, but then there are also options for thinking outside of that box, right? And how else could you interpret this art making? I tried to do, we tried to implement Friday art making nights, FAM, on Zoom. So, you know, like I'd hang out with 4 students like on a Friday night, and we would talk about art, but never actually do it. So, but I think the nice side effect of that was they felt comfortable with me. They felt comfortable with each other. So after a while, we just ended up playing like games on the computer, like Among Us, and we weren't really doing the assignment, but I don't think that's really concerning. I think the fact that you just create this space for them to just be, it was kind of nice. And then they eventually worked on their projects, but I just tried to do everything and not everything worked, but yeah. But I think that helps with engagement, so.
I want to point out, Jen, something you said that is really important in the way how you approach your students with this work, is that you just allow them to be, as you said. And so it's very much an extension of you when you teach that I see in your classroom space, even though it's Zoom. And so I see the students then take your example, and with this project, just be who they are and feel comfortable that they could be vulnerable with that and share if they want. And so there's kind of that additional element that they feel comfortable with you. And so they feel comfortable with the project because of the example you're setting.
Oh, thanks, Caitlin. I mean, that also made me think of, I'm pretty vulnerable with them too. So I'll drop like some tiny bombs about like what's happened in my life, so that, you know, I don't know, it just kind of being a little bit more human makes them a little bit more open, I think. I mean, I shared an altar that I made for my sister last year who passed away, and you know, this is the fourth year she's been gone. I showed them what I did. I even, like with personal narratives, like for VAMP, I'll share my own, you know, heartbreaking stories about, like, you know, families who are trying to come over, trying to immigrate, and then it actually destroys the family instead of bringing it together, or my having had cancer. Like, I'll talk about these things, and I don't know. I mean, I think that ends up helping them feel a little bit more comfortable about their own stories, because I realize I can't just ask them to be their whole selves if I can't be my whole self. So that's like, you know, makes me think of Rendon, and then it makes me also think of Bettina Love. It's just like, you can't just be this one person in the classroom and then someone else outside and someone else on your social media, right? That was a problem she was seeing. It's like teachers say one thing in the classroom and then totally contradict themselves in a Facebook post. So I guess I'm like Professor TMI, so or oversharer. Maybe TMI is too intense, but yeah.
It's particularly effective for this semester as we were doing the introduction to service learning for your classes. And it was coming at a time in which I think we're allowed to talk about it, right? The incident with Taylor and Kim occurred. And so there was a lot of emotions around it, and sharing that with the students, I think it helped them to see how important it is that they speak up when something happens to them. And they connected deeply with that. And so that as the context for civic engagement, and that everybody has a voice and need to use the voice and to improve the community by doing what they can. Your personal experiences then helps to spur the students to emotionally connect with it, and not just in an intellectual sense, but kind of like with Laura and Don was talking about, that they then become involved with this new dream field that you're establishing in your classroom space, that everybody can do this and everybody will be doing it with the civic engagement project if they choose to open.
Great. This is going great. There's been a lot in the chat too. So, some really great things from Kara. I hope I'm saying your name right, Kara, and Hannah and Katie. If you guys want to jump on, be silent for a little bit, or anybody else want to jump on.
I had a question. So this goes back to the engagement discussion that we were talking about earlier. And I've been collaborating with amazing colleagues at Mesa and wonderful mentors. Jen actually is one of them. And I really liked the idea of kind of what we're doing in our 205 class is we talk about a problem, then we think of solutions, and then the students create a plan of action to actually like implement their solutions and go out into their community, or they can kind of dream big. And it's that idea too that I would love for them to take it outside of the classroom. But my question is, how do you approach those students that, there's been a handful of them this semester, and I don't know if it's like COVID and they've got a lot going on, but how do you approach those students that don't believe that a single person can make change?
I can kind of answer that question, Liza. So when we get to slide 11, you guys will see the cover of the book that I use. It's called A Path Appears. Because I really struggled with like trying to get my students to like really understand that their voice matters, their actions matters, like them voting matters. I think like it was kind of like when, your parent or something tells you, but then as a teenager, you're like rebellious and you don't believe them. So I just always felt like every single class was like that. And I really had to rely on the text to say, see, that's exactly what I mean. And so the book, A Path Appears, is like this incredible book. And it's like example after example after example of individuals who have made a difference in their communities. And the book has these great narratives and stories of like, even like little children who like changed the water situation in Africa by just doing small fundraisings. And then it also had examples of adults and college students, and it had examples of millionaires and philanthropists. So I felt like using the book as kind of like a vessel to get the students to see that what I'm saying like is not just what I'm saying, but I have like examples to back it up. Like that really helped the students to like really see it. And then the book also comes with great visuals on YouTube. So the students would go and not only like read about the stories, but then go and find YouTube videos of the characters and the organizations mentioned in the book. And they would also kind of see like a visualization of that as well. So in my experience doing it for 3 semesters now, I feel like without the books, I don't think I would do a great job of getting them to see that they do matter and like one person can make a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that question, Lisa. I mean, I like think about that just in my own life. Like, I'm like, I don't know. We just had like a really big discussion last night with some friends, you know, since we're in the midst of all these elections. But I love what Pegah is saying, like having those texts, but then also I can't stress enough that having community members come in. I think it's in the Bettina Love book, but or it must have been a teach-in I attended. There's so many things I'd seen, but it's like going back to this idea that's communal learning, going back to the community and getting those experts from the community to go into your classroom. They're like everywhere. They all have this knowledge that of history, like the history of the community. They know. But because they're not traditional teachers, no one's really asking them to come into the classroom to talk about those things. So like even just having, somebody like that who may not even be well known, but maybe it's somebody who owned a barbershop for like over 30 years in your community and they've seen things. So, and they'll make tiny changes. I started seeing that, I started joking that my Zooms are just going to be comprised of my bringing my friends to work because I can't like handle lecturing anymore. And also they're probably tired of my voice. But it was not that I was issuing work or putting it on somebody else. It actually made sense. And like, no, my friends are experts at certain things that I have no clue about. And they're awesome at like talking with students, awesome with talking about their work. And then it just ends up being just really cool. Like they can see this one person trying to change something in their classroom, in their community, in their home. And then I don't know, I feel like the students need these more real examples. And to me, like the most real is just pulling people from the community, like locally.
Can I share an example that might address something that Yavo mentioned in the chat? So I recently shared this with Jill and Caitlin, but I'm going to share my screen and show it to you guys too. So like I mentioned earlier, I have my students do the Instagram assignment. So this is like a recent example of my student Ian, and he's actually a math major, but he, you know, has to take English to a 5 as one of my as his requirement. I think he was a STEM major. I think he told me he was a math major and he wanted to become like a future math teacher. So this was his Instagram assignment where he starts out with 6 in the morning at the rendezvous before group sets out to Tijuana. I was not particularly rested, but however, I was feeling quite awake. And then, so it's kind of like an Instagram series post that like narrates his story of that experience of building homes in Tijuana. And then he like talks about how he was able to like use his math and engineering skills to contribute to the group that you know, had to kind of put this home together. So I feel like we can really like see how our disciplines apply in the real world and just make those come out in our lectures and our assignments and then have the students go and apply it into the field. So this is just kind of, the kind of work that he did, and he submitted it for our class, and he documented it really well. But I personally, going back to something that Jason asked earlier, like in regards to like, how do we get the students to do the art and the cajitas? I personally want to like learn how to do more social media stuff, like maybe even like learn myself how to make like vlogs. Because if I can learn it myself, I can demonstrate it to the students in the classroom. And then the students in the classroom can see that it can be like an artistic project that they do with like, social media or their cell phones and things like that. So if you guys know of any like social media content creating, video editing classes, please let me know, because that's something that I really want to learn more of to be able to do. So that way I can teach my students that they can do more than just take pictures and upload to Instagram, but that they can actually make this like a really interesting like YouTube video or, content for everybody else to share. But as of right now, I'm only able to do like take a picture with your cell phone and upload it and write like a 50-word blurb about it. But I do believe like even non-English students could really do this.
Thanks, Pegah, for sharing that and for showing, I put also in the chat, but, Rendon talks about a transdisciplinarity where, multiple disciplines are kind of happening organically. And I think that's a wonderful example that you shared about your student kind of, applying his writing skills, his math skills, his engineering skills. And that's kind of when we talk about the real world application, we can see that this is, this can happen in a real class situation too. We're not saying this is what you do in school or this is what you do in the real world. We're kind of bringing it together, right? So that was a great example. Thank you, Pegah, for sharing that. Yeah, we want to hear from you. So anyone else out there? Anyone we haven't heard from yet? And I always wait 15 seconds, like in my class. And I have my students, like our very first warm up. I have students in their breakout rooms. They have to have a conversation with each other and I give them a topic, but they have to wait 15 seconds before responding to the next person. So it's like this awkward silence, but I call it the comfortable silence warm up. And so, but it's nice because we're okay with silence, right? Sorry, I had to laugh. I was looking at Jen in the chat. Okay, so I just looked, in the chat, Hannah says, I just want my students to feel a part of something and cared for. That's great. Your students have a special teacher in you. I think we all want that. And what's really nice is that we have our group here, right? We have a group of practitioners that feel the same way. Okay, I think we'll end on Hannah's note. That's great, or at least for this part. So we're gonna move on to the next slide. We have a few more, right? I think.
Yes, we do. So as Jen mentioned earlier, during this time of COVID-19 and social upheaval, we recognize that there's a need to ensure that our students are safe while they're conducting these really meaningful learning opportunities, ways that they can assert their voices and their agency to help make the world a better place. So here you can see a selection of, from a list of 35 organizations seeking support. Students can participate from their homes remotely in these projects. So here you see transcription projects from Smithsonian, National Archives, Library of Congress, and also Zooniverse. So Zooniverse is an organization with a variety of different types of projects. And so here you see a screenshot of their front page. So they have the projects, there are about 88 of them divided into different categories, different disciplines, and they range from languages to arts, social science, to climate, nature, biology. And so they, students who are in non-English fields can also participate in these projects too. And there are also the transcription projects can range in different disciplines too. So for example, there's an early woman astronomers notebook transcription project in Zooniverse. And then in the Smithsonian, there's a project on transcribing letters from Freeman's Bureau. So there's a range of different types of transcription projects in which students can be reading from primary documents and helping to create access to data that's on those primary documents. It's also a great way for students to, if they're interested in pursuing research, that this could help them explore a little bit, get a taste of what needs to be diving into primary documents too. There are also local organizations looking for help with their vulnerable population, such as the elderly and the youth. And so I'm going to do a share my screen of the list of different projects. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So there is a list of about 35 different organizations looking for help in a variety of different types of projects. And these are mostly in the United States. There are a few that are international, like Amnesty San Diego with their virtual decoders. Those human rights violation can take place anywhere in the world. So students will be helping to sift through pictures and data and documents in order to gather that information for MSD to build their cases to help with human rights violations internationally. And then there are some that are more local. So for example, Jen was mentioning that some of her students are helping with St. Paul Senior Services. And so her students are painting rocks, creating cards, because these seniors that are with St. Paul's, they're stuck in the home every day to make sure that, you know, they're not catching COVID. And so her students participating in the You Shine project really helps the elders to know that they still matter and to brighten the day with something concrete that they can hold on to. And so these connections, which are also ways of healing for the seniors and ways for our students to connect with them, to be part of something bigger, is so important to maintain, especially now that we're remote and everybody's feeling isolated. So I'm going to stop sharing screen. And going back to the presentation, I think at the next slide, we have just a, oh, there you go. So I'll turn this over to
there we go. Sorry, I just had to unmute myself. Thank you, Caitlin. So again, I want to refer back to this model of the individual and the community, and then this third piece, right, that hidden wisdom of social justice that we shared like the second slide of this presentation. And really we can see service learning again, it's this multi-human curriculum that Rendon talks about, and we can see it translating to this social justice piece. And social justice being the way that we can work with these challenges, right, that are happening around us culturally, politically, in so many different ways. And service learning is an avenue. It's just one way. It's not the way, but it's one way. Service learning and civic engagement, one way of being able to approach social justice in the classroom in a meaningful way and in a way that's authentic to you as the instructor, as the facilitator of your curriculum. All right, next slide. I think we did this one.
I don't know what's going on.
Let's just go back. We had such a good discussion about the dream field. Let's do it again.
Okay.
We're thinking combo.
There we go. Is this
There
it?
we go. Yes. Thank you.
So just a quick primer. Service learning connects what students are learning in the classroom to real world experiences. It is a teaching and learning method. And so it's an opportunity for students to explore what they want to do after they graduate, gain some work skills along the way, reflect on how they can contribute to their community and causes they care about, and start developing their professional network. And so at Mesa, we're seeing it as a continuum of work-based learning in which students are getting ready to join the world work after they graduate, or to extend what they're doing in the world work even further. And so students can add this experience to their resume, extend it into an internship if they like what they're doing, ask for an informational interview with the employees at the organization that they work with to learn more about their career paths and the industry. It can open many doors to them if they choose to embrace this experience. Students can also be meeting and working with people who can vouch for them as references when they go internship or job hunting. So service learning is a type of, civic engagement is a type of service learning, focusing on students working to make a difference in the community. And so Jen earlier was talking about how she rebranded service learning to be civic engagement for her class. And so this hones in specifically on students reflecting on their values and how they can contribute to their community, and increasing their sense of agency to be a more active member of society, to do more of what matters to them and to make an impact. And so with the next slide, we have these texts for the service learning classes, civic engagement classes. And so Jill, Pegah, and Jen had made references to these texts previously. And so to tie this back to the figure on faculty positionality and the roles of artist, healer, liberator, activist, social change agent, humanitarian, and teacher learner, through the text for the service learning classes, civic engagement classes, we see how faculty can manifest the different roles in the classroom space. And so the themes in the reading help to set the context for how students can engage with their service learning experience. And so I think in the chat, there was a little bit of discussion about how students may have trouble accessing their radical imagination to being able to be in touch with the emotional and intuitive side of who they are in the learning. And so these texts help to bring them closer to that. And so with Jill's texts, with the home place and the dwelling, she reimagines her classroom as a home for the students, as a place of belonging, no matter who you are, where you're from. And these texts reinforces the message and extends this notion of home to our broader community and the world at large. So home becomes something that we carry within us and something that we can share with others, of this sense of belonging with others, and this sense of connection that we really want our students to have. With Pegah's text, A Path Appears and Just Mercy, it shows different ways in which communities all across the world need our help and how we can express our humanity through helping one another. And so we see Pegah's sense of wonder on how her students can become agents of change in their individual spaces. With Jen's text of Dear America, students read about the injustices that occurred in the life of Jose Antonio Vargas and connect what they're experiencing in their own lives to Jose's. So this civic engagement lens really works, and it becomes a way for students to channel their passions to make a difference in the lives of others as activists. And so we see in these texts that Jen, Pegah, and Jill, they embody the teaching and the learning role to further extend the roles of being a healer, being a humanitarian, being an activist, social change agent, and also in being an artist with the assignments that they provide for the students to express how they're learning, how they're engaging with the text and also with the service learning experiences, with the visual logs, with the reflection essays. These becomes different ways in which students can connect with how they're feeling emotionally, and also with the way how they can express through words what they're seeing, what they're learning at the community site, and also the changes that are happening internally with themselves. And so I want to also give space to Jill, Pegah, and Jen to chime in if you'd like, to talk a little bit more about the text if you like.
Yeah, I mean, as you heard me earlier, I'm super enthusiastic about all of the books, and I haven't read the Linda Hogan one yet, but I'm excited to do it soon. But just like I mentioned in the tech and in the chat, they are just really good books. And as a English professor in all my 10 years of learning, I've learned that the text really makes the class. So in my experience, my students love them. And one thing I do is they're fairly cheap to purchase. Lisa from the library has purchased ebook versions of them, so students can access them for free. They're super popular, so they have them at the public libraries. And then at the end of the semester, I usually ask students, if you love the book, keep it, pass it on to your family and friends, give them away as, you know, Christmas gifts or something. But I also ask them, but if you're not, like, if you're willing to donate them back to me, and then I pass it on to the students next semester. So this way we can kind of, you know, overcome the issue of textbook purchasing and money that students need. So every semester I usually have like 5 or 6 students who are like, yeah, Pegah, go ahead and give my book away to a student next semester. But, you know, I can't speak, you know, anything better or highly because I love them so much. Oh, and we had Jose Antonio Vargas last semester come to our Mesa Reads book talk with students for free. For 25 minutes, he, you know, had the, you know, talked about his books, and Jen and I do the Mesa Reads where we select one book for the entire campus to read. We get funding to purchase free versions of the book to hand out to classes. And then at the end of the semester, all of the students who have read the book at Mesa College, we were all on a Zoom kind of having like a book club format, and then the author dropped in. So hopefully we'll be able to do more of that, like bring authors of the books that our students read and have them kind of put a face to a name.
Thanks for sharing, Pegah.
Yeah, and so I use the home place and dwellings, or I use them in the service learning class. And again, both books are really, they're narratives, and the home place is really important in terms of creating space for individuals to be who they are, even if it doesn't seem to fit with what other people think they are. So for example, the The subtitle is Memoirs of a Colored Man. I don't know if you can see it on there, so that's why I'm reading it. Memoirs of a Colored Man's Love Affair with Nature. So this is a really important narrative. Students love this book, and it's really important for them to read, and they really get into it. And then the second book is Dwellings, and I don't know if you can read the subtitle, but it says A Spiritual History of the Living World by Linda Hogan. And so she's Chickasaw Indigenous American, and the way she writes is really different. And so I picked texts on purpose that may be unfamiliar to our students. And again, that's one of the goals of the classes that I teach, is to bring to make familiar unfamiliar narratives. So so it's been working so far. And the list that you see here, we want to grow it. So as you're, kind of feeling things out, and you talk with Caitlin afterwards, so she's going to be bombed after this meeting, I'm sure, with all your requests to meet with her, and you start kind of feeling things out and choosing texts or materials or assignments, we want to grow this PowerPoint presentation to include the great work that you're doing. So I look forward to seeing what you guys are using as well. Thank you. And I don't know if Jen wanted to say anything. If not, we could go to the next slide.
Yeah, I've said a lot, so I'm just gonna go to the next slide. But I don't know why it didn't click, but like home place, that's basically what I stole. I didn't steal, but I was borrowing from Bettina Love, is just reorienting the classroom as the home space, right? But it's not just the classroom, it's there are multiple home places in students' lives. But I knew it sounded so familiar, but I'm like, what? Oh gosh. Okay, next slide. Oh, whoa. Is this it? Okay.
Yes, that's it. Yes. All right, thanks, Jen. So again, kind of going on this idea of sharing the assignments you're doing, sharing the texts that you're doing, making sure the students are sharing the impact of the work they do in your class. That's really great too. That's basically when you're having a bad day and you need some inspiration, just look at this great work your students are doing. You're like, oh, okay, this is why it's all worth it. And so you can see this is another capture of the service learning booklet. And there's also an Instagram picture here from Pegah's class. And then also in the middle, I'm not sure if you can see, but it's a multimedia permission release form. So we also created this form, and this information is also on the service learning website on the Mesa College website. So, again, trying to make sure that you get your students' permission to use their work. That's important too. We want to respect and honor their work. But it's really important to have their work and be able to share it with others. And it's really important that we get their approval as well. And usually students are really excited to share their work and like, what? I'm going to be famous. I'm going to be published. So they're excited too. Okay, so I think we're kind of wrapping things up with this next / last slide, perhaps.
Yes. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. I am definitely here to help support you, to bounce ideas off of, provide resources, and kind of help to shape what you may want to do to bring it to life. And we also have a short activity we would like to have your participation in, like I Wish I Wonder, to get some of your thoughts, to see what's going on inside your head. And so I just dropped the link in the chat. If you can go on there, and I can share my screen too, that has that. Let's see. Share screen. Here we go. So you can click on the add button in order to start chiming in. So we're curious as to what are some of the ideas or thoughts that is going on in your mind right now from the workshop. What are you excited about? What do you see as your next steps? What support do you need? And so your feedback will be really appreciated. So you can type in, if you want to get extra creative, upload an image that really speaks to you. So yeah, we love to hear what you are thinking. Oh, maybe we could have some, bring back DJ Derilo for this portion.
Okay, let's see if they'll let us do this at the same time. Is that working?
Okay, so thank you so much. You can see we have so much to say, and in the Padlet, I'm just looking at the Padlet, lots of likes and wishes. I'm looking in here, we have likes. I like that this more interdisciplinary, more disciplinary work. We also have people are just happy to see each other. Let's see, wishing service learning and civic engagement were goals of K-12. Wishing SL or service learning could take it to the next level and offer international opportunities. Actually, in Laura Rendon's book, she gives a few examples of faculty who actually do that. So that's really inspiring. You know, let's see, I'm just kind of glancing over some of the wonderings. Wonder if we can collect data of students doing service learning and see how it has affected their lives in the long run. Seeing how service learning projects can be integrated but not feel like more work. That's where Caitlin comes in handy. So a little plug again for Caitlin. She really can help lessen that load. And then just other thoughts about this. Love to learn about the local organizations that need support and share with my students. Let's see, campus organizations. Love to see how service learning can grow all the way to becoming a graduation requirement, how it can be a designator on their college transcripts. Other colleges have it. So we have a lot more work to do. This is more like a to-do list. Thanks a lot. A happy to-do list. Okay. Is there such? Well, this is one. This is an example of one, if you were wondering. Okay, others, before we close this up. Caitlin?
I feel like the colleagues who shared about like this is more work and stuff like that, like this might be a great sabbatical to write if you qualify for some. Actually, everybody qualifies for sabbatical, even adjuncts. It might be a great sabbatical project to write. But I wonder if like more time and space can be given to faculty to like really do this. Cause like Jill said, it is like a really great to-do list.
I want to also add on to what Pegah is saying, that it sounds kind of daunting, but we can break it down into baby steps. You're not kind of cramming all this into the week before the semester start. We could do this earlier and planning, so that way you're not looking at just having to do a massive amount of syllabus revision and trying to revamp everything. So, it starts out with this idea that you have, this sense of that you want a different experience for your students. And so from there, we grow into what are some of different ways in which the text that you may have can fit to work for service learning, or some of the other inspirations that you're getting from your colleagues today, and maybe from other sources that you're looking to integrate. So it can be something that we could plan out for an entire semester for implementation for the next semester. So don't feel like the burden is all on you. It's definitely not. There are lots of wealth of knowledge here with Jill and Pegah and Jen who've done it, that they could share tips, and any anxiety that you may have about taking this on, definitely can, spread that anxiety, and we can address it too. So I think the really fun part is ideating how it could work for your particular style, because everybody comes at it from a different lens, either your discipline or your worldview, or like Jen was mentioning her Bettina Love mashup with Laura Rendon. And so, whatever that is that you would like to work on to extend further, we can incorporate that into your vision for your service learning classes.
Sorry, I meant to comment on Jill's to-do list. I was like, no, Jill, it's a get-to-do list. You get to do these things, you guys. And we just gave you all our secrets. No, I really am trying to like put that in my language instead of always saying like I have to. I'm like, oh, I get to clean the toilet today. Today's the day. I feel like it changes a little bit, right? Like, oh, that makes me feel good. But yeah, no, I again, like I couldn't have done this without Caitlin's help, and she's so good at trying to help ideate with you, because if you're trying to do something a little bit different, she will, she will be amenable to that, or she'll say, well, no, I'm just kidding. I don't think Caitlin's ever done the high voice with me yet, so yeah, but do it. It's awesome. It's really cool.
I think of it as the kitchen sink. Like anything can fit. And I feel like it's a self-selected group of people who come at it from a really positive standpoint. So it's not like anybody comes into service learning wanting to abuse power. So I think inherent in that, I don't have to like, well, that doesn't happen because people want to do good things and we want to promote people doing good things.
I wish people would abuse that power more. Like, you're going to do this good thing because it'll help someone else. Yeah. Actually, okay.
We want to abuse our students' power. Have more of it, please. Have more.
I mean, so there are some challenges to it. I forgot to mention, there will be some students who are like, could I do this? I've done this last semester. Can I just use that for this semester? I'm like, no, the whole point is for you to do it now. Or I know you said I have to do 8 hours. Can I like do all the 8 hours in one go? No, that doesn't mean civic engagement. Engagement means it has to last, so there will be some negotiations, and some creative options. Like one student really wanted to work with dogs, but was not hearing from the organization. So he just said, can I help out my neighbors and just walk and bathe their dogs for them for free? I'm like, okay, sure. Why not? That's caring for your community. So
I did have one challenge as well. But now in the great scheme of things, looking at it, it really wasn't a challenge. It was probably like a good thing, which was like, it was like the very first day of the semester. And I was like introducing this notion of service learning to the class and like going through the syllabus. And then the student came at the end of class and said, I'm sorry, I'm dropping this class. This class isn't for me. And she said, I just don't believe in doing community service for a grade. And her peer who was standing next to her heard her, and her peer was like, yeah, me too. And then I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to take it personally. But maybe that was like, maybe I didn't explain it properly, or, I didn't explain it like Caitlin did the couple class later when she came to do her presentation. But the one student who was like, yeah, me too, I don't think this class is for me, she actually emailed me. And she said, Professor, I dropped your class, but I regret it. Can I have an ad code again? So I was like, yes, you can have your space back, but I'm really concerned because your attitude, agreeing with that other student, is not really aligned with this community that I want to develop. Like, if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. And then she profusely apologized. And then at the end of the semester, she came to me and apologized some more because she just had such a positive experience in doing service learning. So you may have some students give you pushback on the community service hours of it. There's other things that you can do, which I'm still thinking about that I might do. Like I might make it optional. Like I might say you could either read an extra book or you can do 8 hours of community service or 10 hours of community service. So there's like different ways to do that. But in my 3 semesters of doing it, I've only had that one incident, and everybody else a lot of my students were like, I'm already doing community service at this organization anyway, so might as well do it, So for the most part, it has been positive.
Actually, that's a good point, Pegah. I didn't even think about like the pushback. Because yeah, so most of the time students are just like, well, if I'm going to do all this work, why is it only a B? Why do I have to do this extra thing for an A? And so to me, like, I think because in my syllabus, I set it up as this is what my classroom looks like. It's not just what you're doing here, but it's what you're going to do outside. And then that I think has saved me. No one's actually challenged me on that, fortunately, but in the past, I have had students challenging me on being leaders in the classroom. Like, well, I don't like talking, or I don't want to be a leader. And just like, well, you have to engage in the class though. A students engage in the class. So what's going to be the trade-off then? So if this puts everybody at the B, what do you want to do for the A? And I always tell them, like, I could go the traditional route if you prefer. Like, if you want me to actually like grade you down for grammar or whatever, I'm happy to do that. And so then they're usually like, oh, okay, let's do this thing instead. But I like the option of like, you can do this, or you could do another paper.
Yeah.
But,
Well, it sounds like maybe another workshop, the challenges of service learning, part 2. Well, I do want to honor everybody's time and thank everyone for coming out. We're already at 12, a little bit after 12 actually already. And thank you for hanging on these last extra minutes here with us. So on behalf of everyone co-hosting, thank you so much for being here. And a special thanks to Pegah and Jen for sharing their wonderful stories. And Caitlin, of course. Yes, please bombard her with all of your new ideas, or if you want to ideate, she enjoys ideating.
I do. Thank you, Jill, too.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a big group hug. And we're hugging all of us here, all 10 participants here in the Zoom group hug. All right, well, thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, right? It's Friday. Now you can go clean your home office or grade those assignments in Canvas. All right. Thank you so much.
bye. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
I think, did Pegah get kicked off? I think.